Matthew, do you typically dive into quantitative or qualitative research?
Usually quantitative. Sorry, my
Awesome.
my mic was up.
Oh, no worries. Very cool. Catherine, thank you for joining. And then I'm guessing quantitative as well.
Yeah, that's right.
Awesome. All right, we're going to wait about one more minute, folks. All right, I'm going to go ahead and get us started just to be mindful of everyone's time. My name is Dr. Michele Darchuck. I am a learning integration specialist with Parsec Education. We're an ed tech company that's based in Fresno, California. So a little far from Long Beach, but not too far. What we do is we try to make data more meaningful for school systems, not only through helping to visualize quantitative data really well, but also helping you all to dive into the qualitative piece that marries with the quantitative data that you're looking at. We know a lot of times, especially with compliance related surveys or metrics that you're looking at, you might be able to see really high level data that's giving you some trends into how your students or families are feeling, especially regarding climate. But it doesn't necessarily give you kind of the why behind the data that you're seeing. So this is where I like to say we dive into a little bit of mixed methods, right? So we're diving into a little bit more of the qualitative side. So I'm hoping that this webinar today can give you a really great understanding of how you can dive into this type of data. So these are objectives for this webinar today. We're going to move from general results to diving into deeper insights. We're going to go through some strategies for using your data to drive purposeful dialogue, and then some practical next steps for turning results into action. Any questions before we get started? All right. If you do have questions, please feel free to drop them into the chat. This will be a little bit different from a typical webinar because I'm going to ask you all to come off of mute and drop things into the chat. So please participate and feel welcome and excited to participate in our space today. All right, so we know that you all have to engage with compliance surveys, especially regarding school climate data, right? And we know that a lot of times that data is going to give you a very brief overview of how specific demographics of students are doing, but it doesn't necessarily give you a really great perspective into the types of change that you can make. We know school climate data raises more questions than answers. It's easy to stop at the numbers, but change is going to come from diving deeper. So we really want to find out the story behind the data. We're shifting from interpreting results to making them matter. So typical data results are something like this. Your students or families. I have a daughter who is a junior in high school, so I take these surveys once a year. They're typically Likert scale surveys that are coming from an outside source, or maybe they're being developed internally using a Google form. But it's going to give you a very broad level overview of how your students and families are feeling about the climate and culture of your school. So typical results are like what you're seeing on the slide, where you're seeing 70% of students feel safe at school, or only 55% of staff feel supported. So it's not really giving you the answers into what next steps you can take. It's just giving you a kind of high level overview. So at Parsec, what we want to do is move beyond just getting these top level results and really move into diving deeply into the data through engaging with interviews from members of our community. And if you've done any sort of qualitative research in the past, you know interviews take a lot of time and they take a lot of energy. And you have to go through all of that qualitative data and code it and pick out themes and trends. And then you can move forward into taking actual steps based off of the data that you've seen, or to create quantitative findings based off the interviews that you're doing. But we've created a tool that makes that so much easier for you. So What I'd love to know right now, if you can drop this into the chat, what current methods do you use to gather climate and culture data? And if it's easier for you to just jump off of mute and shout it out, you're welcome to do that as well. Okay, awesome. So it looks like, Daro, you're using a lot of different methodologies to collect climate and culture data. That's awesome. Google Form surveys, interviews, awesome. Thank you, Chad. Observations, very cool. When you're doing the interviews or focus groups, typically, what is your student sample size? Okay, so we're saying they vary depending on the scope of the research, of course. The strategy varies depending on which department we collaborate with. Would you say that your sample size is typically around 20, less than 20, over 20? Over 20? Okay, that's awesome. Very cool. So would love to hear from y'all now. Once you've engaged in sending surveys or interviews or focus groups, which specific actions have you been able to take based off of the data that you've gotten? So we can come off mute for this one. Okay, no problem. Chad, any specific actions that you've taken based off the interviews or Google surveys that you've sent out to your community?
Primarily just what you shared, or sharing high level, especially from the surveys, just sharing high level percentages based on Likert scale results, using interviews and maybe 10 to 20 students to just try and provide a bit of color to those numbers and recommendations and things. But pretty standard, I think.
Awesome. Okay, sounds great.
Hopefully he gets his audio working because Dara can really speak to this better for Long Beach Unified. But we, yeah, typically use sort of, average counts of, favorable or not by topic, category, topic. But yeah, looks like he's back, so maybe he can add something.
Awesome.
Hi. No, Matt is spot on. In terms of next steps when we get the data back, it really is kind of a comprehensive effort across all departments. Sometimes, to be honest, feeling a little disjointed because we do a lot of surveying in this district,
Mhm.
and quite frequently as well across different stakeholder groups. So again, it just kind of depends on what the scope and the purpose of the survey was in the first place. For example, our most recent survey project, our latest one that we just have helped develop with our secondary office,
Mhm.
They're looking at evaluating, getting feedback to revise our current or our new, rather, equitable grading policy.
Oh, nice.
And so, you know, of course, leading up to the launch of that policy, we did extensive focus groups with parents, with staff
Mhm.
members, teachers, even deploying a survey as well just to get their feedback. And so now we're at this inflection point at this point in the year where, you know, we're trying to look ahead to refining those policies so that we can support better grading practices.
Yeah.
And so we now we just deployed a new survey, and going back to our sample size across our um, middle and high schools, we have a sample size of 500. Obviously not anywhere near as ideal in terms of getting a really, you know, in terms of confidence levels, but
Sure.
we have to also be very practical about just over surveying at this point. And so
Yeah.
our team worked together to do a stratified sample across
Okay.
all of our schools. And so that's one example of a survey project we're doing right now. And then, you know, we'll be looking at that data alongside the secondary office to refine our practices.
That's a great example. Thank you for elevating that. And then how do you store that data? Like, where are those are you recording the interviews, or what does that look like?
Uh, the we use Panorama for most of our survey
Okay.
projects.
Yeah.
Um, so it's stored there. We also, and my colleagues can speak more specifically to the process, but we import our data in as well. We often import our raw data into our own analytics software. So we use Power BI. Kat's been, I think Kat's on in here. Kat's here too, right? Yeah.
Hello. Yeah.
Yeah. So she can speak more to the process of how we build our own dashboards. But yeah, we import much of our own raw data, even depending on a platform like Panorama or Google Surveys to deploy our surveys.
Awesome. Very cool. So I love that you're already kind of thinking in that sort of way of like interviewing en masse and getting all of that data collected, which I'm guessing is a huge feat and takes a lot of time and a lot of preparation on your end. So a product that we've created to kind of support you all in this work and to support school systems and uh, in general is called Parsec Real. So it's an interview platform that allows you to interview members of your community at scale. So we like to, we call surveys actually at Parsec the S word. We don't want to survey our community anymore. We want to move away from that into actually interviewing members of your community like what you're doing now, because we know that's where we get the best data, right? When we're able to sit down and actually talk to parents, talk to students, talk to staff, understand what's happening from their perspective, that's where we can really make that systems level change. So I just want to give you an example of an answer that we were able to get from a student within one of our school systems. So this school system wanted to know exactly what the experience of the Black students within their district was, and they also wanted to know what additional supports would help Black students thrive. So what Real does is it allows anybody to engage in an interview with leveraging AI on the back end. And students can choose to respond completely anonymously, like this student did via text. They can choose to record their voice, or they can choose to record a video of themselves. And what happens on the back end or the administrator end is AI will actually analyze all of those answers and pick out top level themes and trends. So, for example, I have a district right now that has a reel open with over 4,000 responses. So they really were able to interview all of their students just using reel. And then within less than an hour, AI was able to aggregate all the top level themes and trends for each question that the students answered. But once students feel comfortable with answering authentically, these are the types of answers that our partners are able to get. And you can see this is very raw, it's very authentic, and it's actually giving voice to the student experience that moves beyond a Likert scale. It's not just saying, how do you feel supported as a Black student on a scale of 1 to 5. And it's not requiring teams of people to go to each school and interview students who they might not have a relationship with and who might not be willing or able to give this sort of authentic response because they're feeling intimidated or nervous or however you might feel in a typical interview. So I'm going to give folks about 30 seconds to kind of just read through this response. So now that you've seen the types of responses that our partners can get from students, what is this bringing up for you all in your team? Would love to have folks just pop off of mute and let us know what this is bringing up for you all. Long Beach team, is this similar to the types of responses that you all get in like your interviews with students or?
I'll jump in again. Yeah, I'm still thinking about what you said earlier about authentic responses, and that is oftentimes the challenge I think with deploying surveys and reaching out for feedback is how do we authentically do that or do it in a way that we can, make the process feel more human like,
Mhm.
I think, because we know that many surveys out there give surveys a bad name.
Yeah,
Um,
that's why it's
and
the S word at Parsec.
yeah, yeah. So how can we do it in a way where and I where it just feels more authentic but also personalized. And then across, I mean, like you mentioned, it's very hard to just go out to all school sites to schedule time, coordinate with staff to do focus groups and interviews. But sometimes that's just the best way to do it. We also use Thought Exchange as well for LCAP and other to gather other community feedback. So this does seem um, very similar in some ways to how we are trying to provide more opportunities for conversational feedback.
Yeah.
And that's what I think that um, person's response kind of brings up for me is it just feels very conversational and very candid and very open. Um, at least from what I can tell, that it seems like um, it's just very open and authentic.
Yeah, and that was really our intentionality behind it, right? Because I was a teacher for 14, 15 years, was a teacher coach. And whenever I would ask for feedback from the teachers that I coached, or whenever I would give feedback to my principal, I would always think, okay, I can be like honest to a certain point, right? I don't want to like lose my job or I don't want to offend somebody or I don't, and I think students definitely feel the same way, right? They can be honest to a certain point. They can tell, well, I'm struggling in math, but I guess it's fine because I don't want to hurt my math teacher's feelings or I don't want people to think that I'm, stupid or I don't know what I'm doing in my math class. So I'm not going to tell them that I'm struggling. I'm just going to give it a 3. It's just okay. So I think the intentionality behind it was to kind of remove that kind of barrier from having the data tied back to a specific person and really just get what you said, that authentic feedback to where nobody feels like the feedback that they're getting is going to affect somebody's job or their livelihood. It really is just feedback on a system and allows districts and those of you at the top levels to make system-wide change that's going to support, at the end of the day, the success of your students overall. Thank you so much for participating in that. I appreciate you being willing to come off of mute and be authentic with me. But we know that data really does support how we make change in systems and also how we drive our conversations. So when we introduce Parsec Real with our partners, we always start with a why. So we say, why is it important to you to collect student voice? Why would this be a tool that you would want to use? Because as a former educator and coaching educators, I know that if you work in education, your job really is a vocation. It really is a calling. I think we all work in education because we want to make an impact in the lives of students and we want to make sure that our future is better for it, right? And so sometimes when we're receiving that critical feedback, it can feel a little self-defeating, or it can cause us to become a little bit defensive because we're like, we just bought, millions of dollars worth of math curriculum and you're saying our math programs still aren't great. Like, what's going on? So I think there's definitely times where we can feel a little bit of that, right? So we like to say that the feedback that you're getting from Real is feedback on a system and not on a person or somebody's vocation or job. It really is data that's meant to help you drive something forward. So frame data around your shared goals or your why. Use neutral, non-blaming language. This isn't a time for you to say like, well, our math department is struggling because of this specific person. No, it's something that we can all focus on together, and ask open-ended questions like, what do you notice? What's standing out to you? And what would help us understand this better? I think this is something that we can start with when you are doing your typical Likert scale surveys, right? Or even when you're beginning with the interviews, and even if you're looking at a smaller sample size of your students, you can say, these are the top level themes and trends that we're seeing. And now we want to dive deeper. Now we want to dive more deeply into why this specific demographic of students is feeling this specific way. Or we want to dive more deeply into why all of our middle school students are saying culture is something that they're struggling with on their campuses. Obviously, these are just out of the air examples, not tying to any organization in particular, just some broad level examples for you all. So how do we do that, right? How do we get those results and push them toward change? You want to prioritize one area of focus. So we call this going through the ladder of inference. You're going to start at the bottom of that ladder where you're going to collect all of your data. Then you're going to choose a very specific set of data to look more deeply into. We want to engage and involve those students and families with identifying the root cause of that data. Then we want to align those with your district goals or with your site goals. And then you want to check in with them for short-term review points. So we always say that if you are sending out a reel, or if you're interviewing or surveying your families, you need to follow up with them. You need to let them know what's happening based off of the surveys or the interviews that you've done. This is actually not coming just from our own experience as a qualitative and quantitative research company. There's actually a study that was recently done, I think it was in 2021 by McKinsey, who said the number one indicator of survey fatigue is feeling that no action is going to be taken based off of the surveys that you've given. I always give the example of whenever I fly for on a specific airline, they always send me an email afterward that says, you've been randomly chosen to give us feedback in this survey. And I'll click on the link and I won't take the survey because I'm like, I'm not going to change like your practices based off the survey that I'm giving. And I actually don't have 5 minutes to click like 3 buttons. I probably do, but I don't think the airline industry is going to change based off the survey. So there is a definite causation analysis to folks not wanting to take surveys because they feel like nothing is going to happen. So we always say, please follow up with your community. In the example from this student, they said that, they think more Black staff hired on their campus would help with this. And we know that that is a huge problem within the teaching world, right? We do not have a lot of Black educators coming into the teacher pipeline, especially where we live in Central California. So that is something that takes a lot of strategic planning and a lot of strategy from the district side to be able to meet the students' specific needs, or to be able to meet the needs of the Black students at this campus. So it doesn't, when you follow up with your community, it doesn't always mean that you need to say like, hey, we heard this and like tomorrow this is going to change. It can be, hey, you gave us this feedback. We are bringing this back to our board. We're forming a committee. We're actually going to have a specific action item written into our LCAP for this. Those are all ways that you can make sure that your community members know that you are actually following up and making sure you're making change based off of the data that you're getting. That's going to help you not only let your community members know that their voices are being heard, but also let you put a little bit more of that onus on the data that you're collecting to members of your team to actually take action-oriented next steps. So we have had a few partners follow up their California Healthy Kids surveys with some follow-up questions to their students using Reel. So I just wanted to give you some examples of those questions that they've been using. We've also noticed that big indicator from our research of survey fatigue is, especially for students, is there being too many questions in the survey, right? So we think 3 is your sweet spot. You can always send a follow-up reel if you'd like, but we actually, our platform, you cannot ask more than 5 questions, because we realized after 5, the answers that you're getting are no longer those rich answers that you're hoping for with an interview platform like Reel, but they're just the one word, like, let me finish this survey kind of response. That doesn't really help us out.
Question there. So
Yeah.
as they're being prompted to respond to these questions, let's say in that scenario there's 3. In what ways does the platform encourage them to take their time to respond and be more thoughtful and not try to blow through the questions too quickly?
So right now, I think in the beginning of the reel, you can put in a message like, there are only 3 questions, or please, we really want to hear your authentic feedback. But we are hoping to increase that by having the AI platform interact with the students eventually. That's a feature that we are going to release in the future. It's not available in the platform yet, but it's something that we know, like, if the AI can have a conversation and dive more deeply into the answers that the respondents are giving, like by asking follow-up questions, we're able to get those deeper, richer responses that we're hoping for. But another way that we are able to kind of show this is any of the responses that come through on the administrative side, you can share out with your community. So much like you just saw me do with this response from the student earlier, you can do the same thing with members of your community, and you can share that out, whether it's a video, audio, or text response. You can say, hey, we got this really response from this student, and we'd really love to shout it out. And responses like this are ways that we can make really impactful change at our site. So I think even modeling for them the types of responses that you would like to get are a great way of encouraging kind of those deeper responses that you're hoping for. And then a great way to do this as well is the way that we structure our questions, right? So instead of saying, how do you feel at school? Tell me about a time when you felt safe and happy at school. So it's already evoking a storytelling response. And you'll notice that all of our questions are open-ended. So they aren't questions like, can you tell me a time? It's, a directive, tell me a time, because a student could easily say, no, I can't tell you a time that I did that, right? It's also really, if you have a question like, do you have any follow-up or next steps for us? How many times have you even put NA, or no, I don't, or not at this time, right? Because you don't want to take the time to actually do that. So I think the way you structure the questions really lends itself to getting a more deeper response as well.
I even think that first question too, like tell me about a time when you felt happy and safe at school. You could first prime them by saying, let's think about a time when you felt happy and safe at school. What was happening that day? Now, can you describe what was happening that day and why that made you feel happy?
100%. Especially like as you're seeing, this is for TK through second grade kiddos. That's where I taught kindergarten and third and special education. So the more that you can describe to them kind of like the setting and you can help them get in that moment, I think that's spot on. Those are definitely the types of questions that you would want to ask. And then in the same vein, we've also edited the questions for 6th through 8th and 9th through 12th students. So secondary students in typical school settings. And you could see from a lot of these questions, you're going to get a variety of responses, right? So I'm just thinking about from the experience of having an 11th grader, if you could change one aspect of your school experience to make it better, what would you change and why? Like, I think from her perspective, it would be like social, but from another student's perspective, it could be academic supports. From another student's perspective, it could be we want to offer more enrichment programs at our school, right? So the great thing is students can answer in those variety of ways, and then the AI on our end will parse that out into themes and trends. So you can get a variety of responses, and then you'll still be able to see each one of those individual responses and make it meaningful for your team as well. And then from my perspective as a teacher coach, I always want to include your staff too. We know that the number one thing that's facing at least California schools, and I'd argue nationwide, is teacher shortage and teacher turnover. So climate and culture must include your staff as well. So would love to hear from y'all, much like before, what actions have you taken based on your staff climate and culture surveys?
I can jump in again for Long Beach. We,
Awesome.
as you're probably aware, we're part of CORE, the consortium. So we've been giving the CORE survey for I think the last 10 years now.
Okay.
SEL and culture and climate surveys. We did stop giving the staff survey a few years ago. I totally agree with you that you know, we're losing the ability to triangulate some of that data and it's a big loss if we're not hearing from our teachers and our staff around their sense of their perceptions around culture and climate. But we were trying to reduce survey fatigue, and we had some other survey projects on the horizon that where we needed to make space for
Sure.
that. But totally in agreement that, yeah, we definitely need to continue hearing from our staff and especially our classroom teachers.
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, they are on the front line, right? They are boots on the ground and they're making the impact in the lives of students. So I think definitely including their voice is key and critical, and making sure that your students are having a safe and joyful experience in school. And also, I know that students know when they're at a school site that teachers leave often, right? They see that and they feel that. And I have heard from parents and families like, you're a great teacher, but are you going to stay? And if parents can see that and kids can see that, that definitely impacts the overall culture of the school. And the longer we have great teachers staying on and staying in the classroom, the better overall it is for kids and families. So
Yeah, that's
we
just
actually
from a
have a,
district
oh, go
perspective.
ahead.
Sorry,
Yeah.
just
No,
wanted to say
please go
that
ahead.
that's not to say that our schools and our school leaders are not,
100%.
yeah,
Yes.
connecting with their staff and deploying their own surveys and,
Sure.
one-on-ones and interviews to make sure that their staff are well supported.
Yes, definitely. And thank you for elevating that. We actually have a partner oops, I skipped a slide. who interviewed her staff at the beginning of this school year. Her name is Melanie Mata. She's the principal at Hope School District in Central California. She's the principal slash superintendent because they're a small school, but they're a very great and mighty school. And she noticed that she needed to make some staff culture changes. And so she just asked this simple question using Reel. This was, I think, the first time, or if not one of the first times that her staff had actually interacted with Reel. And her question was, what does a great culture at our school look like to you? So I'm going to give you all like 30 to 45 seconds to kind of read through the response she was able to get just from this one staff member. And you can see this is a really robust response, right? And this is going to allow her to connect strongly with her staff and also to make changes needed to continue to create an environment where her teachers have longevity and want to stay in the classroom. And because this teacher chose to respond in the written format, they're completely anonymous. We don't collect any personal identifiable information, including emails. So they're able to be authentic, right? They're able to say like, hey, this is exactly what I think about this. And this is how we can move forward. And then if Melanie chose to share this out with her staff, she could. The person who answered would know that they wrote that, right? But nobody else would know. So it's a way to also kind of share that critical feedback without feeling like it's tied to anything. So now that you've seen the type of staff responses, same question as before, anything that this brings up for you all? And if not, no worries. I have really good wait time. I was, like I said, I was in the classroom for a long time. All right, y'all. So just like before, we created these follow-up questions for staff. So if schools do give like the California Healthy Kids, the staff version of it, we've created some follow-up questions to send out to your staff if you'd like to use them. So share a time when you felt especially supported, what helped you to be successful in your role, and any challenges that have made your work more difficult. And if you could improve one aspect of your work environment, what would it be and why? So same as before, you're going to get a wide variety of responses here, right? And sometimes those responses are going to all align and sometimes they're not. So we can still, that's the great thing about Reel is you're able to, like I mentioned earlier, leverage AI to create those themes and trends for you. So that way you're able to take those action-oriented next steps. All right, so that really concludes our webinar for today, but I do like to kind of end the session with any questions that you all have. And I know it says let us know in the chat, but if you're more comfortable coming off of mute to ask your questions, please do that as well.
Hi again.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so Summer Whitley has reached out to Veronica and I about Parsec. So we will be getting back to her shortly. But just
Oh,
a general
cool.
question about how we can analyze this uh anecdotal data. Like if we wanted to, could we analyze by themes, but across, like say at our high schools we have pathways that are industry aligned. So would we be able to just, you know, generate reports that are uh, by generate reports that allow us to look at themes or across, different categories like pathways, or maybe even looking at what the sentiments are across teachers who are maybe new versus those who are
Sure.
in there for 5 years or 10 plus years.
So the great thing about Reel is you have an unlimited number of reels you can create. So what we suggest for finding that very finite or niche data is creating specific reels for that subset. So whether it's your new or maybe your transfer teachers or your teachers who have more longevity or more veteran within your district, or students that are in a particular pathway, we do not send reel out, you do. So you have control over who gets access to the reel, and then they would respond, and then you would have data just for that specific demographic. Any other questions, or go ahead?
Yeah,
Matt.
I think I remember from other things I've seen from Parsec, but you're categorizing these with some sort of AI, or am I wrong
Mhm.
about that? Okay.
Nope, that's correct. Yeah, we use OpenAI on our backend with the parameters of education only. So it's not going to, like pull in data from the World Wide Web. It's just going to use our specific parameters. And then that's how it is aggregating the top level themes and trends.
All right.
Michelle, do you have maybe a real, like a demo one that we could try out at some point just to,
Yeah,
yeah,
I'm actually going to end the session with a demo reel for you. So
awesome.
you'll get to
Thank
try
you.
it. Yeah, great question. And I'm actually going to drop into the chat my email. So if anybody does have any follow-up questions that they just want to shoot me an email about, please do. I am not in a district office. I am not in front of students. So I have a lot more time on my hands than you all do. So please reach out to me if you have any questions. All right, and so now it's time for that reel. So the great thing about reel is there's no app download required. It's just the simple scan of a QR code or the click of a URL. And Brandon just put the URL into the chat. So thank you so much for that. So you can either scan the QR code, like I say, COVID restaurant style, and take it on your phone, or you can click the link and take it on your computer. Anywhere where you have access to a web browser, you can take reel. So tablet, Chromebook, computer, laptop. If you have, a traditional desktop, you could take it on that, whatever works for you. So this is feedback for us. So thank you so much for that. This is how we improve our webinars and our time together. And then I also wanted to elevate our Parsec Summit that is coming up in February 2026. So yep, we're already planning for next year. And this is just a time for you to come up to Fresno if you're not from the Central Valley, and get to know other educators and school leaders and system leaders that are facing similar issues to you are, hear from student voices, hear from educator voices, and really make impactful change for your communities, and get to kind of try out our products too. So I'll leave it back on this side. Any questions before we wrap up today?
Thank you. This is helpful.
Awesome. All right, y'all. Well, thank you so much for coming, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your Wednesday and a great rest of your week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
All right, thank you.